It begins, as it always does, with the smell of dust. Not the common dust of a forgotten attic or a dead world. No, this is the dust of crumbled knowledge. Pulverized philosophy. The fine, scarlet grit of shattered marble and bone. It has a scent, you know. A coppery tang, like old blood, and a sweetness, like rotted papyrus. It coats the back of the throat. It is the first thing you taste upon waking, and the last thing you kiss goodnight. You can try to wash it away, but it seeps into the pores, stains the skin a faint, perpetual pink. We are all painted in the hues of our world's demise. We are all ghosts wearing the color of a forgotten sin. They think I committed a crime, an error of cosmic proportions. They speak of a webway shattered, an emperor betrayed, a legion doomed. They call it the folly of Magnus. They whisper my name as a curse, a byword for hubris. But what if I did nothing wrong? What if every action, every desperate, world-shattering choice, was the only correct move in a game rigged against me from the very beginning? What if the true horror isn't the mistake, but the terrifying, beautiful, and damning perfection of my design? Listen. Come closer to the glass of your screen. Can you feel the faint static? That is the echo of my breath, the residue of a story that was never supposed to be told. This is not a history. It is a confession, a eulogy for a truth that died screaming. And you, my silent, unseen listener, you are now the sole keeper of its ghost. My world, my Prospero, was not the charred rock it would become. It was a symphony in stone and thought. Cities of crystal spiraled towards a sun that burned the color of a ripe peach, their facets scattering light into rainbows that sang soft, psychic lullabies. The air itself was thick with the potential of thought. You could taste a mathematician's theorem on the wind, sharp and clean like mint. You could smell a poet's unfinished verse, musky and complex like old wine. We were the thousand suns. My sons. Our legion was the mind of humanity unfettered. We did not conquer worlds with brute force alone. We unwove their conflicts with logic, healed their plagues with aligned consciousness, and lifted their cultures into new golden ages with a whispered suggestion. We were the scholars, the diplomats, the healers of the Great Crusade. Our power was our wisdom. And I was their father, their guide, their Magnus the Red. A giant of a man, whose form was woven from arcane energy and crimson flesh. I walked the great ocean, the realm you would call the warp, as a king walks his halls. I saw its beauty and its perils, and I believed, with every fiber of my being, that it was a tool to be mastered, a wild stallion to be broken and ridden for the glory of mankind. My greatest sanctum was not a war room, but a library, the Athenaeum of Whispers. It was a place that defied simple geometry. Towers of living crystal housed scrolls that wrote themselves, books bound in leather that still breathed, and data slates that glowed with the captured light of dead stars. The silence there was not empty. It was a pregnant silence, filled with the hum of 10,000 minds, living and dead, all thinking in unison. This was my daily life, a cycle of sublime contemplation. I would rise, and the dust of yesterday's studies would fall from my robes in a soft, red cloud. I would commune with the tutelary spirits of the place, wisps of intelligent energy that curated the knowledge, fetching texts I had not yet realized I needed. I would hear the reports from my captains, the Phocis Kite and the Ozek Ahriman. They spoke of compliance gained through discourse, of Xeno's species enlightened, not exterminated. It was perfect, a utopia of the intellect. But even then, in the heart of that perfection, I felt the first, faint tremor of the cage. It was in the way my sons would sometimes look at me, not just with respect, but with a devotion that bordered on worship. It was in the way the very air of Prospero would sometimes listen to intently. The whispers from the Athenaeum began to have a cadence I did not recognize, a rhythm that was just a fraction off beat. And the dreams. Oh, the dreams. They started as fleeting things. A shadow in the corner of my ocular implant that vanished when I turned. A voice, smooth as oiled silk, that would speak a single, nonsensical word just as I crossed the threshold into sleep. Crown, it would say. Or key. Or price. I dismissed them. The phantoms of an overactive mind, I told myself. The price of swimming in the deep currents of the great ocean. I was Magnus the Red. I was master of the Imperium. What had I to fear from dreams? That was my first and most profound error. Not the hubris of action, but the arrogance of assumption. I believed I was the hunter in the dark. I never stopped to consider that the dark was hunting me. The decree from my father on Terra arrived not as a scroll or a voxcast, but as a psychic resonance that shook the very crystal of my towers. It was a cold, hard, unyielding note in the symphony of Prospero. The Edict of Nicaea. The Council of Nicaea was meant to debate the use of psychers. I argued for understanding, for mastery. I was the living proof of its potential. But my father, who had gifted me this very power, who had built the golden throne, a psychic engine of unimaginable complexity, decreed that all such practices were forbidden. The librariums of every legion were to be disbanded. The great ocean was to be shunned. It was not a law. It was an amputation. He was ordering us to cut out our own eyes, to sever the very nerves that connected us to the universe's greatest mystery. My sons were desolate. Ahriman's face, usually a mask of serene intellect, was pale with disbelief. Phocis Kite, my strong right hand, clenched his fists so hard the ceramite of his gauntlets groaned. Why? He asked me, his voice a low rumble of hurt. Why would the Emperor fear what he himself created? I had no answer for him. Only a cold, creeping dread that began to frost the edges of my perfect world. This was the first true crack in the crystal. The first sign that the game was not being played by the rules I understood. I gathered my sons. I stood before them in the grand precinct, the peach-colored sun glinting from my crimson armor. We will obey, I told them, and the words tasted like ash on my tongue. We are the Thousand Sons. Our loyalty is our defining trait. We will find another way. But in the secret, silent chambers of my heart, I rebelled. Obey? How could I? To deny my nature was to die. To shun the great ocean was to willfully blind myself while a storm gathered on the horizon. I could feel it. A malignancy, a foulness coalescing in the Imperium. A plot of such breathtaking darkness that it threatened to extinguish my father's dream forever. And I was the only one who could see it. So, I began to walk the secret paths. While my sons practiced their sword forms and studied mundane tactics, I delved deeper into the Athenaeum. I sought out the forbidden texts, the ones even the tutelary spirits were reluctant to reveal. The whispers grew louder. The voice in my dreams became a constant companion. He fears you. The voice, smooth, persuasive, intimate, would croon. He fears what you will become. He has built a gilded cage for you on Terra, a throne that is a prison. He does not want a son. He wants a battery. A sacrifice. I fought these whispers. I threw up psychic shields of pure logic. But the voice, it knew me. It knew my pride, my love for my sons, my desperate, aching need for my father's approval. It did not attack my defenses. It simply flowed through the cracks, like smoke. The horror of my daily life was not one of gore or monsters. It was the horror of a slow, inexorable bending. The rituals of study became rituals of paranoia. I would spend hours tracing the flow of energy in the warp, searching for the source of the corruption I knew was there. The dust in the library no longer smelled of knowledge, but of ozone and anticipation. The singing rainbows outside my window began to look like prison bars. The cage was no longer gilded. I could see the cold, hard steel beneath the gold. And I knew, with a certainty that chilled my soul, that I would have to break it. Not for myself, not for power, but to save the very man who had locked me inside. The night I decided to break the edict was the night the dream changed. It was no longer a voice in the dark. It was a vision, so vivid, so real, I could feel the cold of it on my skin. I stood on a plain of black glass. Above me, the sky was a maelstrom of stolen colors, sickly green, bruised purple, a blood red that was deeper and darker than my own flesh. And in the center of it all, a palace. A fortress of such impossible, non-Euclidean geometry that it hurt to look at. It was the source of the corruption, the lair of the great deceiver. And I saw my father, the emperor, on his golden throne. I saw him fighting a tide of shadows, his light guttering, his face a mask of strain. I saw the imperial webway, his masterwork, cracking, breaking, and from those cracks poured things. Formless, shrieking things that fed on thought and soul. The vision was clear. He was losing. He did not know the true nature of the enemy. He was fighting the symptoms, not the disease. I had to warn him. I had to break through the psychic silence he had imposed after Nikiye. It was the only way. I went to the highest chamber of my tallest tower, a place where the fabric of reality was as thin as a whisper. I dismissed my tutors, my guards, even my beloved familiar, a graceful creature of fire and feather named Proteus. I was alone. The only light came from the swirling, chaotic colors of the warp, visible through a great oculus in the ceiling. I began the ritual. It was not a spell of brute force, but one of immense finesse. A single, psychic thread, woven from my own soul stuff, meant to travel across the Imperium and touch my father's mind. A whisper of warning. But the moment I reached out, the voice was there. Not a whisper anymore, but a chorus. The way is barred. It sang, a symphony of lies that felt like truth. He has shut you out. Your thread will snap. Your warning will be lost. You need a blade to cut the veil. You need a key, and it offered me one. A pathway. A tunnel through the warp, pre-dug, smooth and clear. It felt easy. It felt like a gift. A sign that my cause was just. I should have seen the trap. The pathway was too perfect. It smelled wrong. It smelled of cloying perfume, masking something rotten. But I was desperate. The vision of my father's fall was seared behind my eyes. I saw the pride in my legion, the knowledge in my library, the very soul of Prospero, all turning to ash. So, I took the offered key. I focused my power, not on weaving a delicate thread, but on hammering a spike. I channeled the combined psychic might of my entire legion, felt their sleeping minds fuel my own. The chamber shook. The crystal walls wept tears of molten light. The air screamed. And I pushed. I hurled my consciousness not through the warp, but with the warp, along that gilded, perfumed path. The journey was agony. It was not a transit, but a consumption. I felt things brush against my soul, cold, inquisitive, hungry things. I saw landscapes of living madness. I heard the laughter of gods. The pathway was not a tunnel, it was a throat. And I was being swallowed. But I broke through. I saw Terra. I saw the golden throne, my father upon it. And in that nanosecond before the connection was made, I saw the look on his face. It was not gratitude. It was not relief. It was horror. A pure, undiluted, soul-shattering horror. And then my message, my desperate, vital warning about Horus's betrayal, arrived. But it did not arrive as a whisper. It arrived as a psychic thunderclap. A battering ram of raw, untamed energy that smashed into the delicate mechanisms of the golden throne, into the nascent imperial webway. The sound, oh, the sound. It was the sound of a universe breaking. A crystal goblet shattering in slow motion, each shard screaming as it flew apart. I was thrown back into my body on Prospero. I collapsed, my mind bleeding, my soul scorched. The smell in the chamber was no longer ozone. It was the smell of a cancer being burned. The smell of my own failure. I had done it. I had sent the warning. I had saved him. But as I lay there on the cold floor, the voice returned, now a soft, satisfied purr from every shadow in the room. You see, it whispered. You did nothing wrong. You did exactly what was needed. The path is now clear. The true work can begin. I had not prevented a disaster. I had become the instrument of its delivery. The days that followed were a study in silent, screaming panic. The first change was the silence from Terra. My warning had been sent. Horus was a traitor. And yet nothing. No acknowledgement. No legion-wide alert. Only a vast, impenetrable quiet. It was a silence more terrifying than any condemnation. The second change was Prospero itself. The peach-colored sun now seemed to bleed a little more each dawn, staining the sky a lurid, feverish red. The singing crystals of the cities began to hum a different tune, a low, discordant drone that set the teeth on edge. The air, once thick with potential, was now thick with a clinging, psychic static that made concentration difficult. And the red dust began to move. At first, it was subtle, a pattern on the floor that seemed too symmetrical, a swirl in the air that looked like a rune. Then, my son started reporting things. Captain Colophes of the Sixth Fellowship claimed the statues in the Hall of Ages were turning their heads to watch him pass. Psychnuian, the dreaded psychic flies we had purged from the planet, were seen again, not as physical insects, but as shimmering afterimages. There was a psychic needle in the brain. Our daily rituals of survival became rituals of containment, of denial. Armin and I instituted new protocols. Wards of denial were etched into every doorway with silver and mercury. The Legion's psychers, now operating in secret defiance of the edict, were set to constant watch, their minds linked in a psychic net, searching for intrusions. We told ourselves we were fortifying. We were being prudent. But we were lying. We were building a tomb around a corpse that refused to stop twitching. My own rituals became darker, more obsessive. I would spend hours in the scrying chambers, trying to pierce the veil of the future to see what my warning had wrought. But the future was a shattered mirror. I saw 1,000 reflections, 1,000 possibilities, all of them ending in fire. I saw a fleet of wolves, their fangs bared. I saw a cyclops, weeping tears of blood. I saw a tower of books, collapsing in on itself. The voice was my constant companion. It no longer needed to seduce me. Now it counseled me. It was my confidant in the silence. They are coming, it would murmur as I studied the star charts. The wolves of Rus. The Emperor's executioners. Your father has sent them. He believes your warning was an attack. He believes you are the traitor. No. I would whisper, my voice hoarse from disuse. He would not. He understands. He must. Does he? The voice would purr, smooth as silk. He who ordered you to blind yourself? He who fears your power. He has always feared you, Magnus. Now, he has the excuse he needs to be rid of you. To be rid of us. The word us hung in the air. It was the first time the voice had included itself in my fate. A chill, colder than the void between stars, traced its way down my spine. The final fracture in our warped normalcy came from within my own legion. I had summoned my captains to the Athenaeum. We were debating our next move, to send another envoy to Terra, to fortify the system, to do something. Phos's kite was arguing for a preemptive strike. We cannot sit and wait for the axe to fall. We must show our strength. Armin, ever the logician, countered. A show of strength is what they expect. It will confirm their fears. We must be the voice of reason, even if they will not listen. The debate grew heated. The psychic static in the air intensified, feeding on their emotions. And then it happened. Phos's kite, in a rage, slammed his fist on the obsidian table. But he did not just slam it. A surge of raw, uncontrolled warp energy, tinged with the new, foul resonance of Prospero, erupted from him. The table didn't crack, it unfolded. The obsidian writhed like a living thing, sprouting jagged, crystalline growths that twisted towards the ceiling, whispering in a language of sharp edges and broken glass. The chamber fell silent. We all stared at the transformed table. The air smelled of lightning and violets. Phos's kite looked at his hands, his face a mask of terror and awe. My lord, he stammered. I did not mean to, I know, I said, my voice hollow. It was the change. The flesh change, the genetic curse I thought I had bargained away for my legion, was returning. But it was different. It was no longer a random, chaotic mutation. It was purposeful, artistic. It was the world itself, the new, warped reality of Prospero, rewriting my sons in its own image. The horror was no longer an external threat. It was in our blood. It was in the very air we breathed. Our normalcy was a beautiful, terrifying lie. And we were all learning to love the sound of its whispers. The change in Phos's kite was not an isolated incident. It was a plague. A beautiful, horrific plague. Within days, others began to manifest. Men of the Second Fellowship found their armor fusing with their skin, becoming a beautiful, polished carapace of living bone, etched with silver filigree that told stories they had never lived. A warrior from the fourth began to shed his corporeal form, becoming a being of coherent light and shadow, his voice a chorus of echoes. They were not becoming monsters in the crude sense. They were transcending, evolving into something new, something that reflected the new soul of Prospero. And the terrifying part? Some of them welcomed it. I walked the halls of my city, Tisca, and I saw the change everywhere. A librarian, his head now a swirling vortex of starlight and parchment, calmly reciting equations that bent the light around him. A warrior whose arm had become a nest of crystalline serpents, each one humming a different arcane secret. They did not scream in terror. They looked at their transformations with a kind of rapturous wonder. "Do you see, my lord?" One of them, his face now a smooth, featureless obsidian mask, said to me. "The fear is gone. The weakness is gone. We are becoming what we were always meant to be." This was the true escalation. Not the threat of the Space Wolves' fleet, which we could now detect on the edge of our system, their wolf-headed prows silent and accusing. The true horror was the seduction, the temptation to surrender to this beautiful decay. Ahriman came to me, his face grim. "The rituals of containment are failing, my lord. The change is not a disease to be cured. It is a conversion. The planet itself is a catalyst. We are being remade in its image." "What are you suggesting?" I asked, though I dreaded the answer. "We must leave, my lord. Abandon Prospero. Take the Legion into the void. Sever the connection to this source. Abandon Prospero? My home. My masterpiece. The very heart of my being?" It was unthinkable. It was a surrender far greater than any the wolves could force upon me. "He fears the change," the voice cooed in my mind. "Ahriman fears the beauty of what you have wrought. He wishes to chain you to the old, dying ways. He does not understand that you are the architect of a new dawn. These changes are not a curse, Magnus. They are a gift. My gift to you." The voice had a name now. I would not speak it, but I knew it. It was the name of the palace in my vision. It was the name of the great deceiver. My sons were dividing. Ahriman and his followers, the conservatives, saw the change as a catastrophe to be reversed. Others, led by the transformed Phosis kite, saw it as a glorious evolution. And I was trapped in the middle. The father watching his family tear itself apart, all while the wolves' fleet drew closer. The final betrayal came from a source I had believed incorruptible, the Tutelaries. I was in the Athenaeum, trying to find some forgotten lore, some key to halting the change, when I felt a presence. My familiar, Proteus, the graceful creature of fire and feather, landed on my shoulder. For years, it had been my companion, a fragment of a benign warpinity bound to my service. It nuzzled my cheek. Its touch had always been warm, comforting. This time it was cold. A dry, reptilian cold. I turned my head, and I looked into its eyes. They were no longer pools of intelligent fire. They were pits. Infinite, black, and filled with a gleeful, ancient malice. "The price must be paid, Magnus," it said, and its voice was the voice from my dreams, the voice of the deceiver. The key was used. The door was opened. Now, the guest must be welcomed. It dug its claws into my shoulder. Not a painful grip, but a possessive one. A claim of ownership. I recoiled, blasting it away with a surge of psychic power. The creature of fire and feather unraveled, not in a scream of pain, but in a cascade of mocking laughter. It dissolved into a cloud of black smoke and that same, cloying perfume. They were never our guardians. They were our jailers. Our handlers. The entire psychic foundation of Prospero, the very beings that helped us curate our knowledge, were agents of the enemy. I had not mastered the warp. I had been leased a small, beautiful corner of it, and the landlord had just come to collect. I stood there, in the heart of my greatest achievement, the Athenaeum, and I felt the walls themselves watching me. The whispers from the shelves were no longer the whispers of knowledge. They were the whispers of a hungry god. The dust was the dust of my own naivety. The wolves were at the door. My sons were turning into beautiful nightmares. My closest companions were revealed as puppets of a cosmic horror. And the voice in my head was the only one left to counsel me. I had done nothing wrong. Every step had been logical, necessary, righteous. And with every flawless, perfect step, I had marched myself and my entire world directly into hell. The sky above Tiska did not darken with ships. It screamed. The fleet of the space wolves, the Volca Fenrica, translated into the system not with the silent majesty of the void, but with a bestial, psychic roar that clawed at the mind. It was the sound of pure, undiluted hatred for the arcane. The sound of the Emperor's judgment. Leman Russ, the executioner. My brother. I felt his presence, a howl of feral rage in the warp, a stark contrast to the beautiful, insidious corruption that now suffused my world. They did not hail us. They did not demand surrender. They simply opened fire. The first land strikes did not hit our shields. They hit the planet itself. Beams of incandescent energy, designed to crack continents, scarred the face of Prospero. The world groaned. The humming of the crystals became a shriek of agony. My sons rallied. They were not the unified legion of scholars they once were. They were a host of nightmares and desperate men. Ahriman's followers, still mostly human, formed disciplined battle units, their psychic shields flaring to life, a desperate tapestry of ordered light against the storm. The changed, those who had embraced their new forms, moved to the fore. They did not need tactics. They were weapons themselves. I stood atop the highest spire of the Athenaeum, watching the apocalypse unfold. It was beautiful, in a horrific, heart-rending way. The wolf's fire was a brutal, honest orange and red. Our defenses were a symphony of impossible colors. The violet of Ahriman's kind shields, the emerald of biomancy, the silver and gold of the changed as they unleashed powers that rewrote local reality. A squad of wolves, their gray armor stained with soot, breached the outer precinct. They were met by Phosis Kite. He was no longer a man in armor. He was a titan of living crystal and warp energy. He did not shoot them. He sang, and the sound unwove their atoms, turning them into a cloud of glittering dust that hung in the air like a tribute to his power. But for every wolf we disintegrated, 10 more took its place. They fought with an animal fury that was immune to our elegance. Their rune priests chanted, and their primal magic clashed with our refined sorcery, creating storms of contradictory reality that vaporized both friend and foe. The smell was no longer just dust. It was ozone, blood, ceramite, and the strange, sweet scent of spilled warp stuff. The air tasted of iron and lightning. I saw Ahriman, his face a mask of concentration, holding an entire city block under a shimmering dome, deflecting a relentless orbital bombardment. I saw the rune priest otherword make break through, his own shamanistic power a crude axe against Ahriman's scalpel. They dueled, not with blades, but with the raw stuff of creation, and the space between them boiled with impossible colors. This was not a battle. It was a dialogue between two opposing hells. One of brutal, ignorant destruction. One of beautiful, knowing damnation. And I did nothing. I stood on my spire, and I watched. The voice was a constant, soothing murmur in my mind. Let them come, it said. Let them see the magnificence of their failure. They sought to destroy a legion of sorcerers. They will find they have created a legion of gods. Your sons are surpassing their design, Magnus. Because of you. You have freed them. This is not freedom, I whispered, watching a changed son, his body a constellation of eyes, be torn apart by wolf claws. This is slaughter. It is a cocoon, the voice corrected. What is a little slaughter compared to the butterfly that will emerge? You did nothing wrong. You brought them to this moment of becoming. Now, complete the ritual. Let the fire cleanse them. Let the wolf's tooth sever the last ties to your weak, mortal past. Leman Russ landed. I felt the impact of his ship, the graphical, as a physical blow to the planet. I felt his howl, a challenge meant for me and me alone. He was coming. The executioner was here to collect his due. And a part of me, a part that was still the proud pre-march, the loyal son, wanted to go to him. To explain. To make him see. But the larger part, the part that had been seduced by the beautiful horror of it all, knew it was far, far too late for explanations. The ritual was almost complete. The only thing left was the final sacrifice. As the battle raged, a singular, desperate thought pierced the fog of my resignation. The Mirror of Ammon, a relic from a time before my arrival on Prospero, buried deep beneath the Athenaeum. It was said to show a soul its true self, stripped of all illusion. It was a thing of terrifying, absolute truth. Perhaps it could show me a way out. Or perhaps it would simply show me the monster I had become. I descended. I left the symphony of destruction above and walked into the deep, silent heart of my world. The passages below the city were not hewn from rock. They were the petrified veins of a long-dead leviathan, the walls a polished, obsidian black that reflected my distorted form 1,000 times. My own face, cyclopean and grim, stared back at me from every angle. The chamber of the mirror was a perfect sphere. In its center, hovering without support, was the mirror. It was not glass, but a pool of liquid silver, its surface perfectly still. It did not reflect the room. It reflected nothing. An absence. The sounds of the battle vanished. The voice in my head was silent. For the first time in years, there was only me and the terrible, waiting quiet. I stepped before it. I looked into the void. And the void looked back. It did not show me my crimson skin, my horned silhouette, my massive form. It showed me the path. My path. From the moment I first reached into the great ocean with a child's wonder, to the day I bargained for my legion's life, to the instant I took the offered key and shattered my father's dream. I saw it not as a series of mistakes, but as a perfect, intricate tapestry. Every thread, every choice, every arrogant assumption, every desperate gamble, they were all woven together with a master's skill. The hand guiding the needle was not mine. It had never been mine. I was the fabric, not the tailor. The image in the mirror shifted. I saw a different path. The path where I obeyed the edict of Nicaea. I saw myself and my legion, our powers atrophied, our spirits broken. I saw the heresy unfold without my warning. I saw Horus march on Terra, and the Emperor, caught completely by surprise, struck down. The Imperium died in fire and darkness, a short-lived dream snuffed out by a more pragmatic, brutal truth. The voice had been right. My warning, however catastrophic, had bought him time. It had allowed him to prepare, to fortify the palace. My folly had, in its own horrific way, saved humanity. The mirror showed me a third path. The path of now. The path of surrender. I saw myself accepting the full embrace of the power that had seduced me. I saw my body dissolving, not into a monster, but into a vortex of pure, conscious energy. I saw my changed sons, no longer plagued by doubt, becoming a new species, a psychic race that would inherit the galaxy. We would not be servants of the Emperor. We would be his successors, his betters. The temptation was a physical ache. It was the end of struggle, the end of guilt. It was power, absolute and unquestioned. It was the beautiful, silent peace of the abyss. Then, the mirror showed me the cost. I saw the world I would create. A galaxy remade in the image of the great ocean, a realm of endless, shifting paradox, where thought was reality and nightmare was law. A playground for the things that whispered in the dark. My sons would be its princes, and I would be their god-king, a puppet ruler on a throne of lies, forever serving the true power behind the curtain. The image was so beautiful it made me weep, and so horrifying it made me scream. I stumbled back from the mirror. The silence was broken. The voice returned, not as a whisper, but as a shout of triumph. You see? There is no wrong. Only perfection. Only the great game, and you are its grand master. Accept your crown. Above me, I felt a titanic presence. Leman Russ. He had broken into the Athenaeum. He was coming for me. I had a choice. The final choice. Face my brother, the embodiment of my father's blunt, unthinking wrath, or turn and embrace the beautiful, sentient damnation that offered me a throne. I looked one last time into the mirror of Ammon. My true self stared back. It was not a pre-march. It was not a sorcerer. It was not a savior or a destroyer. It was a pawn that had been promoted to a queen, striding across a board of worlds, believing it was winning, never realizing the hand that moved it could, at any moment, tip it over and sweep it into a box. I had done nothing wrong. That was the most terrifying revelation of all. I ascended from the depths to find my world in its death throes. The Athenaeum was a battlefield. The air was thick with the smoke of burning knowledge. Pages from ancient texts fluttered in the air like dying birds, their illuminated scripts glowing faintly before being consumed. The sound was a cacophony, the roar of bolters, the crackle of psychic energy, the bestial howls of the wolves, and the agonized, ecstatic screams of the changed as they were torn apart or transcended completely. And in the center of it all, he stood. Leman Russ, the Wolf King. He was a giant of furs and iron, his armor scarred, his face a snarling mask of fury, and was that pain? His great axe, Hellwinter, was stained with things that were not blood. He saw me, and his single eye burned with a conviction so pure it was blinding. Magnus, he roared, and the sound was a physical force, shaking the very foundations of the tower. Traitor! Sorcerer! Your sins end now. He charged. There was no diplomacy. No parley. Only the execution. I raised my hand. A wall of force, woven from the very essence of the changed Prospero, erupted between us. It was not a shield of light, but a tapestry of living memories, the faces of my sons, the spires of Tisca, the equations of lost sciences. Russ smashed through it without slowing, his own primal aura shredding my refined sorcery like parchment. You do not understand, brother. I cried out, my voice echoing with a power that was no longer entirely my own. I tried to save him. I saw the betrayal. Lies, he bellowed, swinging his axe. The blow was meant to decapitate me. I deflected it with a kind shield, but the impact sent shockwaves of pain through my mind. Your witchery has poisoned your mind. You broke the edict. You shattered the Emperor's work. He was a force of nature. Unreasoning. Unstoppable. Every swing of his axe was a denial of everything I was. Every snarled accusation was the voice of my father's disappointment. We fought through the ruins of my library. He was strength and fury. I was grace and despair. I could have unleashed powers to unmake him, to twist him into a screaming sculpture of flesh, but I held back. A part of me still hoped. A part of me still wanted to be understood. I trapped him in a cage of crystallized time. For a moment, he was frozen, a statue of rage. I stood before him. Listen to me, Leman. Horus has turned. He is the traitor. My warning was clumsy. Yes, a hammer when a scalpel was needed, but it was the only way. The Emperor knows this. Why has he sent you? Why does he not answer? The ice of time cracked. Russ's will was a fire that could not be contained. He shattered the cage, roaring. He sent me because you are a rogue beast that needs to be put down. He does not answer because you are not his son. The word struck me harder than any axe. Not his son. The last fragile thread of my hope snapped. The voice in my head, which had been a seductive whisper, now became a roaring inferno. It flooded my veins with power. The beautiful, horrific change that had been consuming my world now consumed me fully. My form began to shift, to grow. The crimson of my armor deepened to the color of clotting blood. Horns of impossible knowledge curled from my brow. My single eye became a vortex, sucking in the light and the hope of the room. The power was intoxicating. It was absolute. It was right. You are correct, brother, I said, and my voice was now the chorus of the changed, the whisper of the Athenaeum, the voice of the deceiver. I am not his son. I never was. I am something more. I stopped holding back. The battle changed. It was no longer a duel between brothers. It was a war between realities. I unraveled the laws of physics around him. I summoned phantasms of his greatest fears. I turned the air to acid and the floor to grasping hands. Russ fought with the desperate strength of a cornered animal. His rune priests joined the fray, their shamanistic chants creating a bubble of mundane reality in the storm of my power. But it was like trying to hold back the tide with a sieve. I broke his leg with a glance. The sound of the bone snapping was lost in the shriek of the warp. I shattered his armor with a word. He was on his knees, blood pouring from his mouth, his one eye still blazing with defiant hate. I stood over him. The power coursed through me. It would be so easy to end him. to absorb his essence, to take the executioner's strength and add it to my own. This was the climax, the moment of transcendence. The voice screamed in triumph, urging me to complete the ritual, to accept the throne that was my due. I looked down at my brother, broken, bleeding, but unbroken in spirit. And in that moment, I saw the truth not in a mirror, but in his eye. I saw the pawn I had become. To kill him would be to complete my damnation. It would be the final, perfect move in the game, checkmate on the king's executioner. It would prove, beyond any doubt, that I was everything they accused me of. I had done nothing wrong. But to take this final step, that would be the first, conscious, and truly evil act of my life. I lowered my hand. The raging storm of power around me stilled. No, I whispered, to Russ, to the voice, to myself. The voice screamed in fury. What are you doing? Finish him. Claim your birthright. Russ looked up, confused, his hate mingled with disbelief. I turned my back on him. I turned my back on the power. I turned my back on the beautiful, dying world I had created. It was not a surrender. It was a rejection. I reached out with my mind, not to the warp, but to the last vestiges of my legion's will. To Ahriman. Take them, I sent, the thought a wave of pure, agonized love and sorrow. Take our sons and go. Now. While you still can. I felt his shock, his protest. But he obeyed. As Ahriman began the great teleportation, gathering every 1,000 sun he could reach, I focused the last of my uncorrupted power. I created a distraction, a psychic blast so bright it blinded the wolves, the warp, and even the watching gods for a single, precious moment. In that moment, they escaped. A shattered, broken remnant of what we once were, fleeing into the eye of the storm that was now their home. The power I had embraced recoiled. The rejection was a wound deeper than any Russ could inflict. The beautiful changes receded from my form, not out of healing, but out of spite. I was left standing there, in the ruins of my library, a hollow, broken giant. Russ climbed to his feet, his warriors gathering around him. He looked at me, and for a fleeting second, I saw not an executioner, but a brother witnessing a tragedy. Then the moment passed. He raised his axe. The Emperor's justice is upon you, Magnus. I did not resist. The blade fell. It did not kill me. How could it? My bargain was older and deeper than he knew. But it broke me. It shattered my physical form, my connection to this world, my last hope for redemption. As my body dissolved into shards of light and memory, I did not scream in pain. I laughed. A soft, broken, hopeless sound. I had done nothing wrong. And that was the joke. That was the punchline of the universe. The road to hell is not paved with good intentions. It is paved with perfect, flawless, unassailable logic. I am gone from Prospero now. My body is dust. My world is a tomb, a silent, red monument to a question that was never answered. My sons are exiles, forever hunted, forever changing, forever seeking a salvation I could not give them. The voice is still with me. It is no longer a whisper. It is my own voice now. My thoughts. My logic. I sit upon a new throne, in a city of crystal within the warp, a pale imitation of the home I lost. I rule over the damned, and I teach them the secrets I paid everything to learn. I am a pre-march of the traitor legions, a demon prince of the changer of ways. And in the quiet moments, when the screams of the eternally dying fade to a background hum, I think back. To the peach-colored sun, to the singing rainbows, to the smell of dust in the Athenaeum. I trace every step, every decision, from the first spell I cast to the last power I rejected. I look for the error, the single, pivotal mistake that could have changed it all. I never find it. The true horror, my silent listener, is not that we make mistakes. It is that we can do everything right, by our own lights, with the best of intentions and the most flawless of logic, and still damn ourselves for all eternity. So the next time you are faced with a choice, a crossroads in the dark, and you are certain, absolutely certain, that you are doing the right thing, remember my story. Remember the dust of Prospero. And ask yourself, what if you're doing nothing wrong?